Hello, I am creating this video to respond to a friend who wanted to hear about Immanuel Kant in kind of a summarized way. Um, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what Kant's project was and what he was writing in response to, and how to think about continental philosophy in Europe in the late 1700s and kind of where modernity that we know it today kind of has a lot of roots that cross through. And I'd like to talk about how he brought together a lot of the empiricists' work and a lot of the rationalists' work and put them into like one philosophy. Kant is a really great place to start out with like some serious thought about knowledge, about metaphysics. We can trace back a lot of people's views to him, or even if he's not the originator, he represents a view that a lot of people hold to. I mean, that's what a lot of philosophers do, is that they're not pulling it out of a vacuum. They're identifying different systems or patterns or ways of living that humans already use and examining them, fiddling with them, trying to improve them. And so, a lot of times you'll hear, oh, what's the point of philosophy? Because you might as well just live your real life. Well, to that, I would say philosophy allows you to engage with real life better than if you didn't have reflection. So it's not everybody's job to be a philosopher, but a life without some form of philosophy is automatic, impulsive. It's not as good as it could be. If you want something better, if you want something and you can't get it, you need to do some work. And so what Kant does is he actually inverts the paradigm of what a philosopher is. He kind of pulls out the rug from underneath. My curtains just moved. He pulls out the rug. I have a blanket in front of my window to keep the room cooler because it's very hot today. And I went like this to pull the rug, and the blanket just slipped. So he pulls out the rug from underneath these philosophers who want to just play intellectual games, and they aren't aware that even though what they're doing is interesting and could have some value, they're treating it like it is the world rather than treating it as a way of interacting with the world. And so what I mean by that is, in the medieval era, a lot of philosophers got into the habit of basically using reasoning in a way that a mythic mindset would work. So imagine fairy tales and stories and myths and legends, the Norse legends, the Hindu mythology, all the stories of people that they created in their travelings and before we had a real globalized network of civilization. Before that, there were a lot of stories, and so people are using their imaginations to understand the world, and usually you understood those from a cultural context. Well, in the West, we got into the habit of doing that same kind of activity, but with rational terms. And so it seems very true and very precise a lot of ways because it is rational, but there's in the background this imaginative action that's happening. And so a really great example of this happening is in the 11th century, so 1000 to 1100. There's a guy named Anselm of Canterbury, and he was a really famous philosopher. He's still a very poignant character in the history of Christian thought. And Anselm created what's called the ontological argument. And so that kind of goes as follows. It's this idea that, God is perfect. Part of perfection is existence. So if you're going to be perfect in every way, you are perfectly existent. You might think of strength, beauty, permanence, moral flawlessness, the ability to survive continually, existence is, part of ultimate perfection. And so just the idea of ultimate perfection has in it existence. And so anything that is an ultimately perfect being would exist. And so God exists because perfection has inside of it, baked in, is existence. And that seems kind of a funny argument. Why should you be able to say that God exists on the grounds that you can have an idea of something being perfect? So it's sort of, this is sort of a culture that philosophers were involved in the Middle Ages, and that grew into, with the Reformation, a desire for secularization and a desire for a separation between church and thought, and the ability to have a science that isn't governed by the church. And so a lot of philosophers in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s were looking at the outside world, the empirical world, and going, can I have positive knowledge about the outside world based on what I see? Well, now the problem is they liked Plato, and Plato argued that everything is changing, and so what we see is just a shadow of the real things. The real things are the forms, and the forms are the true, lasting, perfect, heavenly version of everything. And so you might say that the difference between a rectangular object, like a book, I show you a book, might say, oh, this is a rectangle. No, this is not a rectangle, because it's not perfectly a rectangle. If you zoom in, you're going to get little bumps and edges, so there's like a little bent corner, there's ripples on the side, and so really it's this abstracted shape of a rectangle that we hold in the mind, the reasoning mind, that is real. And so a lot of philosophers really liked Plato in the Middle Ages. It seems in a lot of ways to be compatible with a lot of our experience. And so our soul inhabits in heaven, and our body is just this temporary vessel, this corpse that is just a place for the soul to transport through. The Greek word for psyche, which we associate with psychology, is very closely related to the word for soul, which is suke. And I might be mixing that up, but it's related to the word butterfly. And so the idea is that your body is like a chrysalis for a butterfly. And the butterfly is the Platonic form of you, your soul. It's going to escape the body when you die. And so there's this tension in the post-Renaissance kind of what the philosophers at the time called themselves the Enlightenment, in the 1600s and 1700s. You have this tension between, is the reasoning mind the real thing, and we can justify existence based on rational ideas, or should we look at the sensible world? Well, now the sensible world has this problem that you can't abstract it because it is fuzzy. These rational concepts are simplified. They're kind of collapsed versions of a lot of things that are related. In this bag, I have almonds, and each almond is different. And so in my mind, when I think of almonds, I have a simplified, generalized version of an almond, and I can't ever see a perfect almond, because it would have to have the qualities of all the almonds, and in a way that isn't subject to change. And so this is kind of the problem with wanting to look at the empirical world and have truth from the empirical world. But there's this tension of you want to move past just conflating the real world with the conceptual world. And so that's kind of where Kant comes in response to, and I'll say more in the next video.